There's a big lie being told to the world and to the American people about what's going on in Venezuela. It mimics the lie being told by the American left. The lie being that the current administrator is a conservative, following conservative policies, and that's what makes him evil. Nothing could be further from the truth. Except perhaps the lie about what happened in Venezuela and what's going on in Venezuela. Now, folks, you need to ask yourself an honest question. If Fox and CNN and ABC and NBC and CBS and all of the mainstream media all agree on the same story and all report the thing the exact same way, wouldn't that make you suspicious? Wouldn't that make you think, maybe we're being fed a line? And it only takes some basic research to prove that you are, in fact, being fed a line. Now, I'm going to go through it today to show you exactly why you're being lied to, exactly what the lie is, what the root of it is, and how they are manipulating your thoughts. Now, here's the big lie. The big lie is that whenever socialism and corruption are tried, or socialism is tried, it always fails, and especially corrupt socialism, because this guy is a corrupt, evil socialist, and that's why his economy is in the tank. Do you honestly think, first of all, that Venezuela is the first country that has tried socialism? Here's one that tried socialism. And you can look up Norway if you want. They have nationalized health care. They have a huge sovereign wealth fund. They are a socialist country. There are socialist countries all over the world that the U.S. doesn't sanction, that the U.S. doesn't criminalize investment in, which is what the U.S. has done. Last administration, this administration, both. For simply being socialist. Now, of course, the response would be, yes, but he's also corrupt. He's a corrupt, evil socialist. Really? All right. If you want to talk about a clinic in corruption, look no further than Colombia. Look no further than Brazil. This is a great article. It's from the Intercept.com. It's about these things in Brazil called the milicia. It's a contraction of the word military and policia. And basically it talks about these private militias that have pretty much overrun Rio and extort and do all sorts of criminal activity. Yet you see absolutely no sanctions, no attempt whatsoever to have the U.S. sanction in any way the state of Brazil, even though their last president just got 12 years in prison for graft. And the current president isn't much better. And one is right and one is left. So they have corrupt leftists, corrupt right, center-right politicians, and the U.S. has never done a dang thing to Brazil. Now you're saying, well, that's because they didn't starve their people. Well, okay, it's the chicken and the egg, folks. There was no starvation in Venezuela prior to 2013. I'm sure there were pockets, but we have problems like that here. The major, huge problem came in the crash of the oil prices in 2013. Now, if you don't want to believe me on that, this is Business Insider. Okay? And it talks about what caused the huge GDP collapse in Venezuela. And you can read this real quick. Business Insider, AU statistics about Venezuela's economic collapse. You can go down here. And this Ricardo Hausman, Harvard-educated economist. Clearly, a 40% decline in per capita GDP is a very rare event, but several factors make the situation in Venezuela even bleaker. For starters, while Venezuela's GDP contraction in constant prices from 2013 to 2017 includes a 17% decline in oil production, which is what he's saying there is that because of mismanagement, allegedly, it excludes the 55% plunge in oil prices during that period. Oil exports fell by U.S. 2,200 per capita from 2012 to 2016, of which U.S. 1,500 was due to the decline in oil prices. So what it's saying is that 75% of the crash of the Bolivar is due to the crash in oil prices. So one of two things that would make you think. Number one, why is so much of their economy slaved to oil? And number two, what caused the crash? Well, the crash in oil prices was orchestrated by OPEC. And you can look this up for yourself. You just Google it, or Bing it, or whatever. Okay, very simply put, oil prices are controlled by OPEC. The U.S. gets in with its buddies in the Gulf, and they decide which direction it's going to go in the next 4 to 5 years. And the U.S. and the Saudis have controlled this for years. And it is no coincidence that Venezuela decided to kick out the DEA, kick out our CIA, not allow any U.S. military bases, or allow large U.S. corporations to come in and buy up their local businesses and control the price of their goods. That's what got them in the crosshairs of the United States to orchestrate this issue with oil prices. Now, the next question I know everybody's going to say, well, clearly their economy shouldn't be so heavily slaved to the export of oil because this could happen again. It makes them too vulnerable. Well, that's interesting because during that time there's another country whose the vast majority of their economy is slaved to oil exports. But the difference between Saudi Arabia and Venezuela is that Saudi Arabia is the socialist's socialist country. It's run by a king. Literally everybody that lives there is on the dole from either the oil industry or the king himself. Now, let me read this for you. This is Economic Times, IndiaTimes.com, International World News, Saudi King Orders. You can just basically Google that title right there, and you can read this for yourself. Most working Saudi Arabians are employed by the state, and like nationals in other energy-flush Gulf monarchies, have long benefited from a generous welfare system. After the 2014 oil market crash, Saudi Arabia, as well as the neighboring UAE, announced a 5% VAT tax. That's interesting. I wonder where we've heard the term VAT tax before on most goods and services, which took effect at the start of the year. King Salman issued a royal decree ordering $267 living allowance for military personnel and public servants. Students, 10% increase in their stipends. Oil-rich Gulf has long been a tax-free haven for both high-income households and migrant laborers who frequently rely on remittances to support their families back home. But the reason they get the money, it's like, okay, well, how do they get the money if they don't have taxes? Well, very simply, the king controls all of it. Every bit of it. But countries in the regions have introduced a series of austerity measures over the past 2 years to boost revenues and cut spending as the slump in world oil prices led to ballooning budget deficits. Jobless rate, 32.6%. Under Friday's royal decree, troops serving at the border with Yemen, where Saudi Arabia is allied with the government in a war against Shiite rebels, will receive a bonus of $1,300 US. The state will also cover up to $22,000 of the tax on any citizen's first home purchase. Income remains tax exempt. Man, where have we heard that before? So, point being is that because the Saudi Arabians literally have their state controlling their entire economy, they were immune from this to a certain extent. It didn't do to Saudi Arabia what it did to Venezuela. And if you want to talk about corruption, if you want to talk about socio-political policies in Saudi Arabia versus Venezuela, kids, women are property here. Women and children are property in the kingdom. So don't tell me about corruption with Venezuela. Don't talk to me about socialism in Venezuela. This doesn't get you in the U.S. crosshairs. And once again, we'll show you this again. Now, look at this. Tell me again about socialism and corruption being the reason for the collapse of the economy in Venezuela. You're telling me all of these countries over here are all constitutional republics with honest, decent, Christian moral leaders. Name one of them that the U.S. has criminalized investing in. Name one of them. Well, I mean, we have a lot of them with travel bans over here, but the vast majority of them don't. And look over here. Look at that teeny weeny little $4.3 million a year to Venezuela, where the world's largest oil reserves are. And as far as the other 17% people talk about the mismanagement, folks, when the U.S. sends almost $500 million a year to Colombia and literally nothing to its neighbors, that causes all sorts of economic mayhem in that region. And that's a fairly complex thing to try to explain about how that works. But point being, there's the country of Bolivia down there. Have we sanctioned Bolivia? Is it a crime to invest in Bolivia? No, it's not. But they are more socialist than any other country down there. And Evo Morales makes Nicolas Maduro and Hugo Chavez look like Mother Teresa. What about Mexico? I mean, my goodness, the administrator ran on all of this issue with immigrants from Central and Mexico coming here, and the Mexican government not doing anything about it, and the corruption, all this. Is it a crime to invest in Mexico? Are there travel bans to Mexico? No. It's a lie. It is a giant, huge lie. What they're telling you, it's something that's easy for a lot of the current supporters of the administration to believe, because they've had this hammered into their brains by every talk radio personality imaginable about how socialism always doesn't work, even though the current administrator said he wants immigrants from a socialist country. They're not going to come here. It doesn't make any sense. When you look at the actual statistics and you look at what's going on, it doesn't make any sense at all. There's a lie being told to everyone. And, pardon me here, I was looking for a specific tab and I can't find it. But the point being, you get the idea. When you do some basic research into what's really going on down there, it's very clear what the goal is. The goal is, what they've miscalculated though, is to collapse the government down there. And when the government collapses, the U.S. thinks it's going to step in. Collapsing governments and attempting to force democracy and force capitalism onto people. How did that work in Afghanistan? How did that work in Iraq? There's going to be people step in down there, and it's going to cause the Cuban Missile Crisis to look like jaywalking. Like, share, subscribe.